Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the first book of Kings, that's Melachim Aleph. We are in chapter 3, Perek Gimel. We completed chapter 2 with the with Solomon's tying up loose ends, so to speak, eliminating the opposition, the potential opposition, and how he either executed or exiled those who participated in various revolts against David and could have represented a potential threat. And we ended on the last note saying that the mamlacha nichona biyad Shlomo, the kingship was now secure in David's and Solomon and Shlomo's hands. This chapter now begins from a point of strength, a point where Shlomo is now going to take what he has, which is the throne and the leadership of the kingdom, and let's see what he does. Let's see how he builds the kingdom and how successful he will be. So, interestingly, there is the first verse of chapter 3 is the first, positive act of building that Shlomo does. And the first thing he does is build an alliance with what was then probably the most powerful, most influential nation on earth, which was Egypt. So, Vayitchatein Shlomo et Paro Melech Mitzrayim. Shlomo married, he developed a bond of marriage together with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So, in those days, that was very common. A royal house would seal their bond in a bond of marriage. This is the first woman that we have entering Shlomo's romantic life. We don't have any, we don't know her name. We don't know whether there was any romance at all between them, because this is presented as a political marriage. And what did Shlomo do? Vayikachet bat Paro, and he took the daughter of Paro, Vayivieha el ir David, and he placed her, he had her reside in the city of David, meaning the city within which David ruled from, ad kaloto, until he finished livnot et beso, building his own house, v'et beit Adonai, and the temple of God. This is a prelude, because this is telling us that he's going to do that, we're going to be reading about the building of his own palace and the building of the palace of God, meaning the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. When he completed those projects, that's when he took her out of the city of David and brought her into his own house. Ve'et Yerushalayim Saviv, and building the walls of Jerusalem. Those three major building projects of Solomon: building walls around Yerushalayim, building the temple, and building his own palace. Now, this is just like a little sidebar, which isn't necessarily presented as something bad, but knowing that in the future we're going to find Solomon's downfall comes from bringing in women from countries all over the world and having them lead him astray. This is like a little seed of potential problem which is being planted here, and that's it. Just this one verse is mentioned. But here it's not necessarily presented as something negative. It's presented as just something he did in order to seal an alliance with the most powerful nation of the world. It's presented as what possibly could be a wise political move, and then we move on. And then this little episode here about him placing her in that house, it's like where he put her to live. We will have more details on why and what the significance of this house later when this story is mentioned again in the book of Chronicles. But here it's just a very curious little episode. So it's kind of like, it sounds like it's trying to tell us this little seed of problem that's planted and placed in the city of David, while Shlomo goes on to build the kingdom and build the mighty kingdom and some of the crowning achievements of his rule, which are the building of the temple, the building of the walls of Jerusalem, and the building of his own palace. Raka'am mizabchim babamot. This is verse 2. Again, this goes, however, the people during this time, in other words, we just mentioned that he's going to be building a house of God, right? That was a little sneak preview there in that last verse. There was no house of God yet. There was no temple. People were bringing their sacrifices to the bamot, literally the high places, meaning the altars that were scattered through typically on mountaintops. That's why they're called bamot, high places. Kilo nivna bayit l'shem Adonai. The house has not yet been built in honor of the name of God. Ad hayamim mohem, until those days. So this is the early days in Solomon's kingdom. And as we know, David wanted to build the house, and God instructed him not to and said it would be Solomon's job. So, leaving the state of affairs where we just mentioned them, verse 3 continues to state, at this point in Shlomo's life, Vaye'ahav Shlomo et Adonai, Shlomo loved God, lo lechet bechukot David aviv, and he therefore followed and went in the path of the laws that his father David had also followed. Rak babamot, however, instead of having a house for God, he was still mizabeach umaktir. He was bringing his karbanot, his sacrifices, and the incense were offered at these bamot, despite the fact that he loved God. So this is something that needs to be rectified. Vayilach hamelech Givona, and the process of his rectifying this happened as follows. The king went to Givon Lizboach Sham to bring sacrifices there, ki hi habamah hagdolah, because that was the largest of the altars. Elef olos yaleh Shlomo, he brought 1,000 burnt sacrifices al hamizbeach hahu, on that altar. It's like he is like beginning the process, like saying, this is like a process of saying goodbye to the bamot. Begivon, and at this point when he does this, it seems that he was doing this for some spiritual reason. He was doing this as part of his worship of God. And this brought about the vision that we're about to learn about, we're about to read about. In Givon, Nira Adonai el Shlomo b'chalom halayla. God appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. Vayomer Elohim, and God said to him, Sha'al, ask me ma'eten lach, what shall I give you? So we have a young, newly anointed Shlomo going to worship at Givon, at this Bama, and going through this huge process of worship, of bringing these burnt offerings to God. At this point, Shlomo we try to imagine his mindset of one, he's about to embark on this tremendous campaign, this lifelong campaign of building a nation in the image of his father, in the path that he was tasked to make, one that demonstrates the love of God and going in God's ways. So Solomon now receives this vision from God himself, right? Vayomer Shlomo. And Shlomo said, how did Shlomo respond to God's question? God asked him, what do you need? What do you want from me? Right? Shlomo now has to think, what is it that I need to ask of God that will help me succeed in this endeavor, that will be my life and my career? You, God, did with your servant David, my father, tremendous kindness. Because he went before you behemet, in truth, uvitzdaka, and in righteousness, uviyishrat levav, and with a straight heart, literally, a heart full of integrity, yimach, with you. Vatishmarlo et hachesed hagadol hazeh, and you preserved this great kindness with that you had done with David. You preserved it and kept it. Vatitin lo bain, and you gave him a son, Yoshev al Kiso Kayom Hazeh, who is now sitting on his throne, as we see today. V'ata, and now Adonai Elohai, the Lord my God, Atzahim lachto et avdecha, you have made your servant, you have made me the king, Tachat David Avdi, in place of my father David. V'yonochi na'ar katon, I am a young boy, lo edat seis vavo, I don't know coming and going, meaning I don't know anything about this task that I see in front of me. My first task, eliminating my opposition. David gave me advice. He told me what to do. And David told me I should walk in your path, and God, so I'm doing those. But now what? I need to know. Your servant is residing within the nation that you chose. This is the chosen nation to follow you and to follow your ways, right? I have a tremendous responsibility. I'm leading this nation. I'm Rav, a great amount of people. They can't even be counted. Too many of them. There's so many. We can't even number them or count them. So here I am with this tremendous responsibility, the leader of this tremendous nation, the nation that you chose, and I don't know what to do. Give to your servant a heart that can hear, so that it can judge your nation. To understand between good and bad. For who can possibly have the skill necessary to judge this tremendous and huge and heavy burden of this nation. This is fascinating the way he says it. Shlomo understood that in order to judge, you need to listen. Leiv shomea. I need the heart that can listen to the people and understand what it is that they need. And that's what I need in order to be able to judge your nation. This is a tremendous amount of wisdom that it requires. It requires a tremendous amount of humility to know and understand that in order to judge the people, you have to listen. You have to listen to what people are saying. And listen to what they need and what their needs are. And this was a very good thing in God's eyes. That Shlomo had asked for this thing, asked for wisdom. And God said to him, because you have asked for this thing, for wisdom. You didn't ask me for a long life. You didn't ask me for wealth. You didn't ask me for victories over your enemies. But rather you asked for the understanding to be able to hear justice, right? To remember the emphasis being on, in order to mete out justice, one must hear, one must listen. I have done. When God says He does something, it's as if it's already done, right? Exactly as you asked. I have given you a leiv chacham v'navon, a wise and understanding heart. That before you there has never been anyone like you, and after you there never will be anyone like you. When God says, I have done as you have spoken, another way of understanding this is that God is saying, I have already given you this, because clearly a person who has the wisdom to ask such a question is a person who already has the wisdom necessary. It's in you, God is saying. It's already within you. Hine asisi chidvarecha. I have done as you have spoken. That is the reason why Shlomo was the proper king to be chosen, because he had the humility to understand that he's supposed to listen, which is the opposite of the arrogance of Adoniyahu, who was his chief rival for being king. That understanding that he has to listen to know, lishmoa mishpat. V'gam asher shelo sha'alta nasati lecha. And now I'm on top of what I have already given you, which is that wisdom. I also have given you that which you didn't ask. Gam osher gam kavod, honor and wealth, or wealth and honor. Asher lo haya chamocha ish b'melachim kol yamecha. So much that there will have been no one like you among all of the kings, and that you will have your entire life. Im telech b'drachai, and if you go in my ways, lishmor chukai mitzvosai, to keep and observe my commandments, kasher halach David avicha, as your father David did, v'ha'arachti et yamecha, I will lengthen your days. So you will get long life. You already have honor. You already have wealth. And I will give you long days if you keep my instructions and live the life that you're supposed to live. This is what what Solomon had in his dream, Vayikatz Shlomo, And Shlomo Solomon woke up, v'hinei chalom, and behold, it was a dream. Vayavoyu Yerushalayim, and he came to Jerusalem. Vayamod lifnei Aron brit Adonai, and he stood before the ark. Remember, the ark, the Aron, was in Jerusalem, while the main bama, the main altar, was in Givon. And then he brought sacrifices in Jerusalem. So this is the second part of the process. First, he went to pray where the altar was. He had this dream and vision, and he realizes now it's time to transfer this service to Jerusalem, and in a prelude to what's going to happen when he builds the house of God, which the people were commanded by Moses, by Moshe. We were commanded to build a house to God once the nation is established. So this is the first half of chapter 3. Now we're going to, in the next half, we're going to study one of the most famous stories about the wisdom of Solomon, something that represents how he listened, how he had a lev lishmoa, a heart that listened, and how he dispensed justice that way. Thank you so much for studying this together with me. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 3 and, of course, the rest of this book of Kings together.